Agest, your weekly breakfast of insights, tips and tricks, and general information that will help anyone trying to move things forward in this digital world of accounting. This week, I'm joined by Alistair Barlow, formerly of Flinder and Ascendant, now doing his own secretive little thing, which he might touch on. We'll find out if we go through. And we're here to talk about the recent announcement by Digits, a US-based entity that is, well, as they say, is self-proclaimed AI native accounting platform, and they have announced a number of AI agents that sit inside the system and can perform actions up to 8,500 times faster than a traditional accountant. And I'm intrigued at what this will mean for us, the industry, and also, is it realistic? So look, Alistair, thank you for coming on. I'm just going to kind of hand this over to you. What's your opinion on this, mate? Like, do you think this is real?
Morning, everybody. Hey, Ryan. Great to be here. Do I think it's real? I think, yes, elements of it are real. Do I think the white paper they have put out, sorry, the scientific research paper they've put out is real? They've obviously got facts to back that up. Has it been a fair, unbiased assessment that the everyday accountant that works in practice would read and go, oh, cool, or otherwise, depending on what your view and take on AI is? I think probably there's some information in there that is, one, a little biased, and two, probably unrepresentative of how we would view transactions being processed. So that's probably a long-winded way of saying, I think it's amazing. I think honestly, I think it's amazing that we're seeing companies like this start be more innovative than the incumbents we see in the market. But also, I really want to trust what they do. And accountancy is built on trust, and to market something which is probably gone some sort of grey matter in there that's not black or white is the misleading part of it. And as accountants, we tend to be quite skeptical, don't we? So I think that's my answer. I think it's also worth saying that, Digits themselves, they're what, 6 years old, something like that. They've raised almost $100 million across 3 funding rounds, but by incredible VCs like Benchmark, who were early investors in Uber and other mainstream tech companies you've heard of, Google Ventures, and more recently SoftBank Vision Fund, and they have a valuation of $565 million, right? So they have been invested by some very good VCs in the US that back some very good companies. So, there's some substance there. They've given us a snapshot of what a bookkeeper does in the wider context of accounting and said, this is how accurate we are in our assessment and our test. And maybe we can dive into that and riff off that a little bit more. But I think the general concept is brilliant. Yeah,
it sounds like at the start you were trying to avoid being sued by talking around is it real or not, but that, that's fair, right? Because we're critiquing something that they have created, as I say, a scientific paper about, and so there must be some backing. But I think feel weighted.
I think it's worth saying, like, we can't reperform this test either, right? So we can't know. We don't see the actual raw data behind the transactions that they've selected. We can't see the raw data behind the tests that they've run on the 18,000 transactions. We can't see the speed that it's done, and we can't see what the benchmark actual raw results are from the humans. And some of that's come out is a little disappointing. I mean, if you want to touch on that, like, they had, so they've got this white paper and they've chosen 12 accountants to reperform a sample of those transactions. So already the sample size of 12 accountants is
very small.
Benchmark. Yeah. And then we don't know anything about those 12 accountants, how experienced they are.
Yeah, well, we can probably speculate a bit. So let's go into some of the details of what they've actually announced here. So they've released agents. Now, if you jumped on one of our prior digital digests, we talked about the QuickBooks agents that they were bringing in, and there was 4 of them. And Digits have kind of done something similar. They've got a bookkeeping agent, they've got a finance agent, and they've got a reporting agent, all doing slightly different things. The bookkeeping one, I guess, is the one that's quite interesting because it's getting your transactions into the right place to enable then the finance, the reporting, which are mostly focused on dashboards and adjustments to get those figures correct. But with those, what they did say, and like going back to those 12 accountants, is that the accuracy of the agent, the bookkeeping agent, was 97.8% accurate. Yeah, and then the bookkeepers were only 79.1%. And I believe it was it Mike Ward that picked up on the comments of this, that what bookkeeper can continue to be employed by only being 79.1% accurate, right? That is just not good enough. And so maybe that there's a bias to it. And admittedly, we had Jeff Siebert. Apologies, Jeff, if I'm pronouncing your surname incorrect here, but the CEO of Digits jump on and give some context around this. And he did say these were completely new businesses to those bookkeepers. They hadn't seen any of the data before. Same as what the agents were. Obviously, it's not been trained on it. So it was kind of testing, like, if it's completely raw, no prior experience, how will people perform? And you would expect a bookkeeper to be not as good at that start, but 79.1% feels very low. I mean, what's your viewpoint on that?
So I think, actually, I go back a level and just understand what exactly are they doing in this test, right? So
yep.
I read this twice. I saw it a few weeks ago. I read this twice, and I had to kind of double take. And I was like, oh, they're only classifying the transaction. So they're not taking a PDF and extracting it and getting all the data fields and the metadata around that invoice correct. They're not adding a VAT rate to it. They're not getting a line item description and interpreting that from the context of the invoice. And they're not making sure totals, net, back gross, etc. All they're doing is taking an invoice and classifying it to a general ledger code. So that, to me, already is like a tiny little snapshot of. Now, obviously, OCR has been, or machine learning OCR has been around a long time, and it's pretty high accuracy on tools like Dext and. I was about to say HubDoc and auto entry, but maybe not like those tools from what I hear in the marketplace. But Dex, very high OCR rate of actually extracting the data from the invoice as well. So maybe they've kind of like parked that and said we're only focusing on GL classification. So I think that's an important part to focus in on. That is all the test was doing. There was nothing to do with does that have the VAT rate right? Is the interpretation, is it a valid invoice, etc. It was only on GL classification. Now, I don't know, Ryan, if you do any bookkeeping yourself these days. I didn't until I've obviously like exited Flinder and have a couple of interests of companies myself. I'm back to doing bookkeeping because like it's so small. And I kind of look at the general ledger and I'm like, I'll give you an example, right? So a zero invoice comes in and you look at it in a standard chart of accounts, one before you've tailored and optimized to what your business is. And you kind of go, could this go to subscriptions or could this go to IT costs, right? Or could it go to accountants? And so I think, and for me, it doesn't really matter. And I had this conversation internally with my co-founder that as long as the budget is set to that same general ledger code, and as long as it's consistent from month to month, actually that's what it's really about. But I think from kind of reading the report that there was some, the way they set up these pools of the 12 accountants, dividing them into looking at 500 transactions each, and there were 3 in a pool. There was some disagreement as to where it went in those 3 codes. I've gone out of focus, haven't I? Let's try and get me back in focus.
That's right.
And so there's some ambiguity in the code classification. Now, that I think you see that in business, right? You see that in practice. So that for me is like that's going to happen. But what's right? Is it right to post is it right to post a zero cost to accountancy? Is it right to post it to subscriptions? Is it right to post it to IT or technology costs? Depending on where you want it, and that can be entirely down to you. I think what is a little weird is they've used these 12 accountants to do that, who one in five invoices basically they've posted wrongly, right? And let's assume it's not subjective or grey, it's like black or white, so they posted wrongly. And then they have, I think the US is a bit different to the UK market. They have these gap accountants, right, which I guess are like kind of big 4 or top 10 firms come along, and they're a bit more auditor focused, and they go, and that's a clear distinction, I think, in the US compared to what it is in the UK market. Typically in the UK market, management accountants are still very highly trained and highly skilled, and those gap accountants have come along and gone, oh, you've got one of those wrong, you've got one of those wrong in the kind of the 5 that they've chosen to give a 20% error rate. So I guess a long way of saying I am surprised that they're categorically saying that only 80% of those invoices were categorized correctly by the management accountants, but also the way it was set up, as you say, that they've got no historic context of it. The LLM assessment they did across 19 or so LLMs had no historic context and a very simple prompt, but yet Digits had context. They had history behind it. And so you're going to be higher, you're going to have a higher accuracy rate by kind of, understanding what the context and where the history of those invoices have been posted previously.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that is interesting. But you talk about invoices. Jeff was very kind in that he did actually say he'd come on, and then I reminded him it's probably his 2 a.m. where he is. So he decided to stay in bed, understandably. But he did send over some details of what the agents are doing. And talked a little bit about the flow of what happens. So firstly, he said, when you create a new Digits account, you can either choose to copy your data from existing ledger or start fresh. If you're copying the existing data, the agent automatically trains itself across all the data you've got. So it looks at where you have put all your historic information.
And does it say how much history they ingest? Do they ingest 12 months? Or
no, I think it's all. Complete. Your complete data history. So no matter what you've got in there, it does that. You can then link your banks, your cards, and your payroll, and pick whenever that information is going to come across. And then it will also start to train on any information that's coming into that system. Now, as I guess any person should do, once something's been put in the wrong place, you should then learn and put it in the right place. And that's what the agent is doing as well, right? So if anything gets adjusted, it will pick up on that and update it. Same way that when you do something in Dext and you change the code that it's prompting to put it to, it remembers where you put it to, and it learns from that. But it's doing that automatically in the background, which I think is another positive thing. When I've talked to some of the bookkeeping AI tools nowadays, some of them aren't doing that all the time, and that's not great, but a lot of them do. That's a big benefit to it. But it does focus very much on cash. So I think as you said, it's looking at the invoice and allocating it. It's looking at a bank transaction and allocate to the nominal ledger. But what I couldn't get out there is if it's automatically able to pick up the bank transaction and allocate it to an invoice. That bit I don't think was touched on. I don't know if you've seen anything in the white paper, but I've not seen anything what Jeff said. And that, to me, is a much more challenging area whenever I look at bookkeeping to identify what invoice is this matching against. It's a payment of 20 invoices. What does this represent? That is actually the bit that takes a much longer time. And I don't think AI bookkeepers or agents are anywhere near that. Do you feel that we're close to that yet?
So I think first of all, if we just park what the paper says, I guess they're coming out and going, hey, we're as accurate or near. In that case, we're saying, hey, we're more accurate than humans at doing this, right? At code classification. And I think maybe there's some improvements in the methodology of the study, but I think overall what's coming out of that is we're nearing to the point where code classification is really great and really accurate, and I think that's the part to be commended. We can be nitpicky and pick apart the methodology they had on did they have enough outsourced management accountants to post, did they have the right sample size, did they have the right etc. Right? But overall, I think what we can take positively from the report is this is amazing for freeing up accounting time to deliver much more relationship-based accounting services, right? So I think that is hugely commendable that Digits are driving that forward on that side of the pond. So I think that's great to Jeff, his entire team, and the $100 million backing that he's had from all those people. Now, I just don't think the scope of the report was to focus on allocating bank transactions. Which, is that your question? Is it around allocating bank transactions?
I think it's what is, is the scope when because there's big numbers to this, right? And they're essentially saying or implying we can be 8,500 times faster than a bookkeeper, but in a very small subset of what a bookkeeper does. And my context is actually the bits where the bookkeeper adds more value is the bits that aren't covered. That was, I guess, was my kind of viewpoint on that.
Yeah, I guess if you look at the end to end of a bookkeeper stroke accountant, you're right. It's probably saying this tiny, and if you split up, like as human beings, we have roles, right? So we have a role of a bookkeeper. AI doesn't satisfy roles; it satisfies tasks. And so,
Yep.
A bookkeeper and accountant, their role, their job, if you like, is made up of let's go simplify 100 tasks, right? Probably many more. Now AI is based, or agents are specifically picking up tasks. And so I guess what they've done here is they've gone, oh, this one task will measure and benchmark the performance of this one task. And we can say in this one task, we're 8,500 times quicker than a bookkeeper. And they've kind of left it like that. Whereas, one, we haven't actually done the maths on 8,500 times faster. Now, that is probably quicker than a web page or an API call can even happen. So it's obviously in their system that 8,500 times faster is happening. But on a specific task of allocating to a GL code. And that's probably what the very micro level they're talking about. Maybe they'll then expand and they'll have another white paper on, we are 100 times faster at choosing the VAT code, or we're, 250 times faster at doing something. So I think they're building up based on tasks. Now, obviously, as one task disappears from a bookkeeper accountant's role, it can free up time for in that job to do another task and another task, right? And I think what we'll end up seeing is like more and more tasks that I'll call them mundane or kind of lower level activities where you don't need to necessarily think as much, will be freed up, and then it will shift a bookkeeper and accountant up that kind of relationship or value curve to do more tasks that they're probably much more interested in doing, that will be a much longer time horizon before AI can get there. And so we'll probably find that AI is chasing up, imagine we're running up a hill and AI is chasing us up that hill, and the lower, all the time it's taking those activities away from us, right? And maybe it'll never get to the top of the hill, and we'll always have that premium cream that we're doing.
And I think there is some other context to this, because you talk about, allowing more time for advisory, but I guess their finance agent, their reporting agent, is also speeding up what we can do from an advisory aspect, because the finance agent is looking at everything you're doing with your suppliers, with your customers, and bringing to the fore in like a dashboard widget style way the key information you need that will trigger you into those conversations. So rather than you having to hunt for them or do some analysis to get to it, it is bringing to the fore. So it is powering you, enabling you to do more of that advisory, which is exactly what you're saying, what we should be doing. And the reporting agent is kind of drafting those reports, those KPIs, the executive summary side. Now, obviously, as you said, even on bookkeeping, there's a lot of context to it. Reporting is even more subjective. And I have a feeling, because we've been through this before with AI forecasting tools, we had one, say 5-6 years ago, which was which was where it sounds so poorly that it didn't really get used. I think there's going to be more criticism or more challenge around what it's delivering on that compared to bookkeeping, which is more mechanical. But yeah, I mean, enabling it, I think, is a good plus. And as you say, it's great that digits are moving the needle. And something that Dave Selleck and Jack Overton were discussing when we announced that we were having this, we were going to do this live webinar, is AI smashing through the barrier or just creeping up on us? And I feel what you're saying, Alistair, is you believe it's more creeping. It's slowly taking bits rather than, like the iPhone came in and then just everyone had to have an iPhone. It's more iteratively changing and tweaking the way we work. Is that your opinion?
I think at the moment it is, but I think I'm very bullish on AI for obvious reasons, right? So full disclosure, I've co-founded an AI first application in the accounting world, right? So I see firsthand what we can do, like literally see firsthand what's possible. But I also see the challenges around it, right? And so there are some teething problems and challenges that we need to, like, collectively, everybody needs to overcome. But the speed of improvement is very fast, and therefore I think as we are testing, and we see things like digits in the market and such like, I think at some point there'll be like the tap just opens and it floods the market. So that's my feeling right now. But like seeing it firsthand, I'm a practitioner. For 20 odd years, I know what it's like to be at the coalface of accounting. I know the trust we need. I know the quality that we need to deliver to clients. I know how things operate in a firm. And I now see it on the inside as well. And it absolutely, like, what we do in some of accounting is mechanical. And so if we have the context in the data, we can absolutely get there. I think the important distinction is it's an enabler for us, and there still will be a human in the loop because there are exceptions. Like, even in this report for digits, they talk about edge cases not being processed, right? And so that 97.5% accuracy is like the top end ever, because there are no, sorry, not ever, but currently, because there are no edge cases in there. Throw in the edge cases, you could be down significantly because they're just like really highly complex things that you need a human to do. So I think the really important thing for AI is to identify when there are those exceptions to be able to bring the human in the loop. That's like that, because you don't want transactions going through that shouldn't be going through, right? So it's so confident that it's actually classified or done something correct. You want that to be flagged for a human in the loop to get involved with, but very much an enabler. I was going to say something else there, but I'll pause at that point.
Well, look, I think you're right, and I've got this viewpoint that at the moment it's creeping up. But we'll get to a tipping point, and there'll be certain triggers that I think will enable, will deliver on that. One is, I think, once e-invoicing properly takes hold, and we've got the connection of data between, because you can pull in much more reliable data. You're not having to, I guess, worry too much about missing transactions. You can streamline this more reliable flow of data, I guess, that can trigger things. But also, there's a tipping point on trust, and there's a tipping point on a certain level of efficiency. And once you hit that, I guess, across potentially all three areas, there will be a platform that skyrockets. It won't be on its own. There'll be others that compete and possibly collaborate. But we'll get to that point where actually, they make a markable difference. In the same way that the likes of Xero and QuickBooks Online changed from desktop to cloud, it took a while before it got to that kind of mass market appeal, and then it started to snowball. More slowly than I think AI is going to do, but much faster than like the computers did in back when they came out in the internet, right? So everything essentially kind of gets faster now. But there's a couple of things that I want to touch on, I guess, before we kind of wrap sharp. First is, there was I thought, a very interesting bit in their release here. They said it was 8,500 times faster, but only 24 times lower the cost. So does that mean the platform is 100 or more than 100 times more costly than the bookkeeper? The maths just seems odd there. You'd think if it's 8,500 times faster, surely it's going to be a comparable in the reduction of cost, or your platform is incredibly expensive. Am I misunderstanding that?
I mean, maybe, yeah. I don't. Fuck knows. I don't know what I'd say.
Who knows, right? But I think that's a bit that sticks out.
Box on what they've pumped out here, but if it's 8,500 times quicker, I mean, I guess per transaction it's more expensive. Then is that what we're saying? I haven't actually run the maths on this. Is that what we're saying?
Well, yeah, it
must be more expensive.
That's what it's essentially saying, right? So, but not a little bit more expensive. No. Between 100 and 200 times more expensive, if I've got my maths right, which is like nuts. So I assume there's something that's gone awry there. That doesn't make any sense to me.
Maybe you should just get me on that one beforehand.
I don't prep.
I listen to the MFM podcast and they say never do maths live. So
Well, yeah, this is where someone's going to comment and go, no, Ryan, you can't do maths, which is fine. And then
Maybe
I guess
let's do that as a follow-up comment in this, yeah.
Yeah, sounds good. We can clarify. And then I guess the last bit I've got as a question for you is, and I appreciate this might be one in which you're not entirely impartial, but we've had the likes of QuickBooks say, we're going to release AI agents, we're going to bring them in. Xero have said they're going to do something similar, but not giving any clarification of how that worked. QuickBooks have. Now, when QuickBooks have actually said this, they said all these agents are going to release, and then their product update kind of focused on a very, very tiny bit, which was kind of bank allocations, similar, I guess, to what we're focusing on to some extent with digits here. But do you think the defining factor, that the people that are going to win are more likely to be in a platform that has already been around for a while, has the market base, and just needs to bring in the AI and then kind of make sure they don't leave, or one which is starting afresh, completely AI powered, and will then have to suck clients to it? Do you feel there's a guide from, your knowledge that you think will win out at this point? Is it too early to tell?
So it's a really interesting question, isn't it? So 2 years ago in our ski trip, there was talk. So I run a ski trip in January each year with like 20-30 accounting thought leaders, should we say? We talked about it, and we were quite bullish that it's probably someone like Google or Amazon or someone that can organize data that will come in and just like wipe out every existing incumbent in the market. I mean, you can't bet against the Xeros of this world that have, what's their market valuation, 30 billion or something like that. Someone else can correct us on that. Anyway, they've got the power, right? They've got the power, but equally, can they make big bets because they are accountable to the market and fluctuations in share price? That's the risk that they have. And so what do new entrants have? That one, they can build from the core up, right? They don't have existing customers, but they have the will and the freedom to build whatever their vision. Like, they're not confined at all by the market, as in like shareholders or market volatility. They're not confined by existing customers. They're not confined by existing architecture, and they're not constrained by talent that, talking engineering talent here, that is maybe not as innovative. And so what do I mean by that? Well, new companies that can offer great stock options or share option packages, they're going to attract, and that are doing things that are really innovative, are going to attract much better engineers than a company like, one of the incumbents who just don't have that package, because and that just will attract the best engineers. And so I think there are more individual advantages for new entrants, but of course the advantage for existing incumbents is they've got they've kind of got those powers of market dominance or kind of market share at the moment. And they've got the market. Like, look at Xero's marketplace. Xero's marketplace is probably the biggest asset they have. It's not the product. It's not the product itself. And there's a lot of noise about the price versus the product itself. But the biggest power they have, the moat that Xero has, is the marketplace. But maybe at some point in the future, you won't need a marketplace, because you'll be operating agents in a very different way. So I think individually there are more factors that weigh towards a new entrant. But the biggest factor for the main ones at the moment is the fact they've got existing customer base. That's the advantage they've got. But hey, look, 10, 15 years ago, whatever it was, Sage, FTSE 100 company, they had the power, they had the brand, but what did they do with the cloud? Like, they're still so far behind. And yeah, QBO is just ugly to use, and it's just like,
well, that's subjective. That's subjective, Alistair, and I'm sure there's lots of QBO, passionate people.
That's a fact. It is ugly to use, and people only use it because they got incentivized as like very cheap ledgers.
All right, there you go. There's the controversial opinion at the end of this. I think that's a perfect.
Each to their own, but my view is either new entrants will take it, or they'll spur the others on and they'll be acquired by them. But Digit's half a billion valuation. Like they're obviously going hard at this, and there's some in the UK starting this as well. So my bet is that we're going to see massive disruption and seismic change in the profession from new entrants.
I think that is exactly right. Look, thank you so much, Alistair, for coming on. I think this has been a really good dive into Digit's, also AI-powered finance ledgers. If you do want to make sure you catch future discussions, please subscribe to the Digital Disruptors LinkedIn channel or our YouTube channel. We'll be having a live discussion every morning at 9 a.m. on a topical news item that we think is going to have a big impact on the industry. Thanks again for joining, and we'll speak to you again soon.